Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the Bears beat reporter for the Chicago Tribune and a contributor to ESPN 1000. Please welcome Dan Wiederer to the program. Dan, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm relaxed, John. I'm refreshed. The bye week came at a good time. It's time to gear up for the second half of this NFL season.
What's been your take on this entire Bears season so far?
You know, it's obviously going to be mostly about Justin Fields and the growth that he's able to show in 2021. The record doesn't surprise me. I think it's probably a little bit disappointing for the Bears that they weren't able to squeeze either one or both of these last two games out. Obviously, very winnable games against the 49ers and then a good rally against Pittsburgh that ended up in the loss column. And you think about how different the energy in the city would be if they were 5-4, right? And right in the thick of the playoff race with Justin Fields' ascent continuing the way it is. Instead, they're 3-6, and it changes a little bit of the way you look at the long term of this organization. Still, everything comes back to Fields, and what we've seen here now through a couple months worth of starts is that this kid has a DNA that is really, really infectious. A very competitive kid, very driven, and obviously to see him stand up in some big moments the last few weeks, particularly in the fourth quarter of games, and show that he has that ability to make big plays in big moments is very encouraging for this organization as a whole, and it's obviously something they have to continue getting for the last 8 games of the year.
How have you evaluated his development so far?
Yeah, it's never going to be linear with a rookie quarterback. There's going to be peaks, there's going to be valleys, and it's really about how a young quarterback handles those, right? The danger in playing a rookie quarterback too early is you don't want him to either A, fall into bad habits, right? That come from pressing a little bit too much or not being able to react quick enough to what opposing defenses are showing. And number two is just dealing with the struggle, right? There's going to be struggle as a rookie quarterback. And how do you deal with that? How do you persevere? How do you show the resilience and the resolve to get through those things? We've seen some disastrous games for Fields and the Bears offense against the Browns, later against the Buccaneers. And the way that he has an ability to just sort of put those behind him quickly, get himself recentered and refocused. You hear a lot about the word presence with Fields from the people at Hallis Hall. That's been obvious, right? They want him to be a star eventually. Right now, as a rookie, they want him to be steady. He has been steady. He has been invested in the process. And so you feel really, really good about all the things that you felt about Justin Fields in April when the Bears drafted him, showing up now in year one. And obviously the star potential is much further up the road, but to see these little bits of growth is very, very promising.
What do you think of his performance against Pittsburgh, especially the fourth quarter comeback?
Yeah, well, there's a number of things because, again, that was an in-game show of resolve. The Bears weren't good offensively in the first half. They got off to a terrible start offensively. And when you're on the road on Monday night against a quality opponent in a raucous stadium, that's going to test you as a rookie quarterback. And to see him hang in there and bring the Bears back from down 20-6 when they're starting the fourth quarter, then get the ball down 6 in the fourth quarter and basically tell everyone in the huddle, this is where we wanted this game to be. We wanted this to be on our hands late in the game, needing a touchdown to put us ahead. To go down the field with that 7-play, 75-yard touchdown drive, it just tells you a lot about his character and, again, really that hunger to be on that stage in those moments, right? He talks about it. It's one thing to talk about being built for this. It's another thing to show people that you're built for this. And I think we're seeing in small snapshots that mentally anyway, he is certainly up to the challenge of taking on these great challenges and these great pressures and trying to see what he's made of.
So what more needs to be done for Fields? Like, what's he still lack, and what's the next step in this developmental process?
Yeah, well, number one, the biggest thing he lacks is experience, right? And that's the benefit of playing a rookie quarterback. One of the things that I think is so promising about a game like Monday night, even though it winds up in the loss column, is it gives Justin Fields an NFL experience, right? And in that case, it's an experience in a big stage, bright lights game in the fourth quarter of all the things we just talked about with the pressure rising. And now when the Bears eventually get to a stage where these games have greater significance and greater stakes to them, Justin's been there already, right? And he can look around at those guys in the huddle and say, remember Pittsburgh? Remember Pittsburgh back in the fall of 2021, and remember how we went down the field and scored? That's an experience that's there. So he needs experiences, plural, going forward to understand not only moments, but what opposing defenses are doing to him, to understand how to decode coverages before he sees them, be able to get up to the snap and understand where the answers in each play are. Those things are only going to come with time on task. And so I think that's one of the benefits of getting him an extensive amount of experience as a rookie. It's going to pay off way up the road, and the Bears are going to be happy looking back that they were able to turn him loose in these environments. And then beyond that, you just need to find a way to marry his strengths, right, and his gifts as a quarterback, as an athlete, with what you're trying to do offensively. That's up right now to Matt Nagy and his coaching staff to continue evolving that. If they're not here beyond this year, then it's going to be up to a new staff to try to figure out what those things are and get that thing jump started again.
How do you think Matt Nagy's done in developing Justin Fields?
It's hard to say, right? And I think this is the hardest challenge that is going to be facing upper management at Halas Hall going ahead, because the one thing I talk about consistently is you have to be able to discern at the end of the year how much of Justin Fields' development is translatable to the coaching that he's getting, right? How much of it is Matt Nagy and John DeFilippo and Bill Lazor and the fingerprints that they're putting all over him and molding him, and how much of it is happening just because Justin Fields is a gifted athlete, a gifted quarterback with high football intelligence and a great drive. And so you have to sort of, I keep talking about the pie chart, right? At the end of the year, you have to say, what is the development, caused by, right? And you got to put that together. Is it Matt Nagy and his coaching staff 52%? Is it Justin 48 within those slices of pie? How do you break those things up? It's hard to say right now. And I think we need a higher volume of work now for Matt Nagy's sake to see these last 8 games of the year and to see how they continue allowing their offense to evolve and bringing Justin along in ways that bring out his greatest strengths to be accentuated on a more regular basis.
Have you seen anything this year to justify Matt Nagy's stand right now?
Not to this point, right? I think we're still looking for signs that this team can be consistent, right? We talk about everything that happened in Pittsburgh, and it's funny because the city seemed to be rightfully so intoxicated by the way Justin Fields and the offense played in the second half of that game. Well, guess what? They still lost the game. Because they lost the game, they haven't experienced victory since leaving Las Vegas more than a month ago. They're going to welcome the Ravens to town on Sunday, 40 days removed from the last time they won a football game. And so this is the 3rd straight year of this, John, right? They suffered through a catastrophic 4-game losing streak in 2019, 6-game losing streak in 2020. Here we are again, 4-game losing streak. Those things have to go on a head coach's ledger no matter what it looks like, right? And so now they've got to figure out a way to pull out of this and use these final 8 games to prove that you deserve to stay in the role that you're in. If not, I think it's very fair for outsiders to question whether Matt's the right guy for this job and whether the folks up the chain at Halas Hall have to consider making a change in the best interest of the franchise to get this star quarterback to a level where he can take this team to play championship football sooner rather than later.
So if the Bears make the playoff, let's say, if they turn it around, is Matt Nagy sticking around?
The conversation will change a little bit. You look at the NFC standings right now, there's only one team below the Bears on that rung, and it's the winless Detroit Lions, right? And so the path to the playoffs is littered with potholes, right? And it's obviously, I think we've done a disservice to the league by adding the 7th seed to the playoffs, right? Because it gives teams hope and it gives them a belief that they are chasing something that really doesn't mean much. And the Bears were the poster child of this last year, getting the 7th seed for the first time in the NFC playoffs and proving immediately that they didn't belong, right? Getting blown out of the first round by the New Orleans Saints after finishing 8-8, after experiencing a 6-game losing streak. The 7th seed on the playoffs is good for TV. It's good for a Saturday and Sunday in January for viewers. But I think for the league as a whole, it sort of clouds the reality of what mediocrity looks like and what a playoff team should actually look like. And so, again, at the end of the year, even if the Bears were to squeeze out that 7th seed, I would hope that the folks at Halas Hall would have a sophisticated enough view to understand what it looked like on the way to the playoffs, and then evaluate that accordingly, not just based on the actual playoff berth, but what it looked like. Because I will say till my dying breath that the 2020 Bears were not a playoff team, even though they played a playoff game.
Dan Wiederer here on Sports Talk Chicago. Now, let me ask you this. What's the issue in hiring a new coach, though? Could this potentially stymie developing for Justin Fields, knowing that there's a new system coming in?
Yeah, it could. And that's the gamble you make as an organization when you sign up to let a regime that's not necessarily on steady footing pick your next quarterback, because you don't know what it's going to look like, and you don't know how long it's going to last. And this happens with young quarterbacks all over the league all the time. My colleague at the Tribune, Brad Biggs, had looked at a number of draft classes, and I believe it was the last 20 first-round picks before this year. 10 of them had experienced a coaching change after their rookie season, which is hard to believe, right? So it's 50% of the time in recent timing where a young quarterback has had to go into year 2 learning a new coaching staff and a new system. this is the gamble that's played in the NFL all the time. And certainly it would be a risk, but it also could have potential rewards because as you've seen over the last few years, Matt Nagy's now on his 4th starting quarterback here. That's not including Chase Daniel. And he hasn't really been able to bring the best out of any of them yet, right? And so if you're looking to make sure that you do not waste golden years of Justin Fields' career and you do not waste a window of opportunity that seems to be opening, you have to ask these hard questions. You have to make hard decisions. And that's going to be up to people that get paid a lot more than you and I do to make those decisions at year's end and figure out what the best path to a championship truly is.
Who do you think would be a good candidate? Who'd mesh with Fields to bring out the best in him?
Well, look, I mean, you've got hot names, Eric Bieniemy in Kansas City and what, the work he's done with that offense over the year. Brian Daboll in Buffalo is largely credited for some of the breakthroughs that Josh Allen has experienced over the last few years. Those are intriguing names from offensive mind standpoints that will give you an opportunity to explore, right, and figure out what you want to do with a young and talented quarterback. That, in my opinion, there's going to be a lot of people around the league that are lining up to take this job at year's end if it becomes available, just because of what Justin Fields has shown to this point. I also don't think you need to be married to the idea of hiring an offensive-minded head coach. If you can get a defensive-minded head coach that can bring a talented offensive staff with him, keep yourself open-minded to that. I mean, look, Brian Daboll's in Buffalo right now with a defensive-minded head coach in Sean McDermott, and they look like Super Bowl contenders, right? Got back on the right track this past weekend, and certainly will be a factor come January. And so you just have to keep yourself open-minded and understanding what the long-term goal of the organization is, which is to compete for a championship, but also to compete for championships, plural, on a consistent basis. That's something, as you know, this organization has not done really since the early 1990s.
What's been a surprise for the offense this year?
How long it's taken to get unlocked in the passing game. I think that for one thing, on a positive front, I think that their ability to commit to the running game and have success running the football has been a credit to the coaching staff's ability to switch their mindset in midstream and figure out what they want to do. And then it's a credit to the way the offensive line is played in the run game. And then obviously you have David Montgomery, who's a strong runner showing signs of promise. And then he goes out and Khalil Herbert comes in and looks everybody's good, right? And so you've shown that as an offense, you can commit yourself to the running game, and that when you do commit yourself to the running game, you can have success running it. And then by extension, that should loosen up defense and makes things easier for your passing attack. So I would say that on a positive development, the ability for the Bears to discover that running game and stay wedded to it has been a promising surprise.
So why has it been different this year compared to years past? I mean, previously under Matt Nagy, the run game hasn't been this prolific. This year, it's been much better. What do you think makes up for that difference?
Yeah, desperation, I think, right? I think they had no choice. They've been trying everything for most of the last 2+ years, trying to get something to work. And then eventually Matt got to a point coming out of that loss in Cleveland where they were a disaster, where he opened the forum up to coaches, to players that said, hey, what do we need to do to make sure that games like that don't happen on a regular basis? And they all said, hey, look, let's start by trying to establish an identity for a young quarterback. And in order to establish an identity for a young quarterback, let's start by giving him a reliable running game. It was a desperation move. It worked. It's shown some profits as they've gone forward. Now they have to figure out how to evolve on the fly as other teams adjust to the strong running game. And now Justin can do some things with his legs, and the Bears can do some things with play action in the bootleg game to open things up. We'll see where it goes from here. But I think more than anything, they were trying everything, throwing everything against the wall, finally got something to stick, and here we are.
How's the offensive line been?
Look, I think you can always ask for improvement, particularly in pass blocking. I think up front, they've been steady. I think they've been sturdy in terms of establishing that running game and doing some things. Listen, Jason Peters coming in putting his fishing rod down and joining the Bears in the middle of August at age 39 years old, and coming in and providing the stability and leadership that he's provided has been impressive, right? And that sets a tone for an entire unit that, side to side, has some guys that are really driven to get this thing right. Sam Mustipher is a center, a guy that you can rely on every single day to give you everything he has. They've been promising. I think ultimately up the road, you're going to want to add more talent and depth to this line. Perhaps the emergence of these rookie offensive tackles, Larry Borum now getting a chance to start at right tackle, Tevin Jenkins now ready to come off of IR and at least work back into practice, gives you an opportunity to maybe see what your future looks like there. And then when you go into the offseason of 2022, you have to figure out where your needs are and how desperate they are in order to figure out what you need to fill.
What do you expect out of Tevin Jenkins?
I don't know, right? Like we have not seen Tevin Jenkins practice with this team since minicamp, right? And that's June. That seems like 15 years ago now. And he's coming off of back surgery. And so you have to test his strength. You have to test where he's at mentally with a lot of things coming at him without a ramp up period, right? Training camp gives you an opportunity to work on a lot of things for a lot of hours without a lot of pressure attached. Well, now the Bears are in preparation mode for games every week, and they don't have a lot of time to devote to grooming a young offensive tackle as much as they would have in the summer. And so I think one challenge for Tevin right now as he works back into practice is not trying to make up for 3.5 months of lost time in 3 weeks, right? That physically and mentally, that's a pressure that he's going to have to respond to here in the short term. And then the Bears are going to have to just kind of play around with it and let him know, look, you don't have to start for us by Thanksgiving. You don't have to start for us even by, the week before Christmas. Just bring yourself along at a pace that feels right. We've got guys starting in front of you right now. They can hold it down, and then we'll figure out whether you fit on the right side or the left side. We'll figure out what our record is. We'll figure out where you're at physically, strength-wise, mentally, all those things, and then we'll figure out what the niche is for 2021. Hopefully, also trying to figure out what the niche is for 2022 and beyond.
Can you explain to me the connection Justin Fields has with his wide receiving core?
In regards to just planning and preparation or on the field?
Well, a couple of guys, especially Allen Robinson's had a down year. Why do you think that is? And does that have something to do with Fields and trying to get on the same page?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because I think the Allen Robinson mystery is the one that the inquest in Chicago hasn't turned up a lot of definitive answers to, right? I think there's a lot of moving parts to this. And I think some of this is by necessity. They had to wed themselves to the running game so much to help Justin as a rookie quarterback that it's taken away some of the opportunities to use the talents that he has in the receiving core, particularly with Robinson and Darnell Mooney. I think you see early on that the connection with Mooney seems to be sharp, that there seems to be a trust there. There seems to be a chemistry that's budding. And I think it's very promising for this organization long-term. Well, now you got to figure out how to get a guy who's proven it in this league that he can be a 100 catch, 1,400 yard receiver and get more out of him over these last 8 weeks of the season. Don't forget, John, Allen Robinson is in the final year of his contract because he's again on the franchise tag, right? He's playing another contract year. And so you want to try to give Allen Robinson every reason to stick around here in 2022 and beyond. Some of that is showing him that his connection with Justin Fields is going to be strong. And so those two have to continue to work on it. They have to continue to work Allen into the game plan more often. I think you saw a couple signs in that game in Pittsburgh where Robinson gets deep and Fields found him. You see some other plays on third down where he hits Robinson for first downs, and you say, hopefully every one of those things creates more of a trust, mutual trust between the two guys to get on the same page, to be more productive. And hopefully that production leads more in the second half. But you're right. It hasn't been consistent enough through the first half of the season for anyone's liking.
Will the Bears retain him? I mean, it might be early to ask that question, but today, would you retain him?
If I'm the Bears, I'd make every effort to keep Allen Robinson in my organization because I know who Allen Robinson is. He's a low maintenance pro, right? And even with contract squabbles the last 2 years, he's put it to the side every single day of practice and every game day, and he's gone out there and he's given you everything he has. Now, look, you got to figure out what the numbers are financially to make that work. On top of that, Allen Robinson has to decide whether he wants to stick around here. And that's why I say these last 8 games are so significant to his future, because if you've got your choice to go, in this later stage of your career and hand pick which quarterback and which offense you want to play for, you want to have options, right? You want to see, okay, is there a quarterback here who can get me the ball on a consistent basis and allow me to catch 100 balls and allow me to have 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns in a season? Or am I going to stick here in an offense that's been sputtering for most of my time in Chicago and try to ride it out, right? They've got to answer those questions in these last 8 games. If they can do what they did in the second half in Pittsburgh, which is have 287 yards of offense, which is show that the passing game can flourish when it's not garbage time. Well, now all of a sudden, Allen might say, boy, Justin throws a really nice deep ball. I like catching that, right? I want to catch a lot of those in the years to come. He's a young, promising quarterback. I want to see what this looks like. A lot of moving parts to that because, again, with some of the questions we talked about earlier, we don't even know who's going to be running this organization come March, right? And so then Allen's, when his contract expires on that franchise tag in March, he's got to look around the organization and go, oh God, who's here, right? And do I want to stick around and play for them? If not, it's up to him to go find a suitable home.
What's the direction of this Bears team then over the next 8 games?
I don't know, right? Like I've been covering this team for 9 years, and direction isn't a word that I would attach to this team very often. They seem directionless more often than not. It's hard to figure out where they're going to end up. Again, you stop at the bye week and you say 3-6. You stop at the bye week and you say 4-game losing streak. You stop and you see all the struggles they've had, and you can't become so enamored with this flash that happened in the second half in Pittsburgh that you convince yourself that everything's right. Again, the defense has had chances to win games the last 2 games against the 49ers and the Steelers, and they failed, right? They didn't get it done with a lead in Pittsburgh, and after they came back to cut the lead to 1 against the 49ers. And so you've got a lot of things to answer offense, defense, special teams wise to create the direction that everyone's seeking in Chicago, right? And so I don't know what the direction is right now. I think it's up to them to provide it, and they've got 8 more games. There's a lot more season left. And they've got to figure out a way to give people in the outside world and people internally an idea that they are doing things the right way and creating a direction that is worth going down, right? You can have a direction, but it may be pointing you in the wrong direction, right? So let's get that arrow pointed toward championships and consistent success and see where they can take it.
Dan Wiederer, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Dan, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, tell me about your time covering ACC basketball.
Dream job, John, in a lot of ways. I mean, when you get to go down to Tobacco Road and your bosses tell you, oh, okay, you're going to get the opportunity to cover college basketball, but not just one program, 4 programs. You're going to get to cover Duke. You're going to get to cover North Carolina. You're going to get to cover NC State. You're going to get to cover Wake Forest a little bit when they're really good. And then you get out of there after 7 seasons and you say, whoa, I covered 3 national championship teams in 7 seasons. It was really, really cool to be able to cover high-level success on a consistent basis, to be around legends in coaching, Roy Williams and Coach K, right? To be able to pick their brains on leadership, on team building, on seeing what their fingerprints on a program look like. Look, we talk a lot about the struggles the Bears have had in my 9 years covering them. There weren't pronounced struggles for those programs when I was down there. And again, 3 championships, national championships I got to cover in 7 seasons. It was really, really cool to have a behind the curtain look at how that sausage is made and how those programs not only achieve success, but sustain it over decades and decades and decades. And as you know, this will be Coach K's final year as a coach at Duke this year. And so it's kind of cool from afar, not only to see that journey come to an end, but to see this passing of a torch to a Chicago guy, Jon Scheyer, right, whose career I covered while he was playing at Duke. So there's some cool things this winter in kind of tracking that as well.
Yeah, what's the contrast been like from going to so much winning to now all this losing with the Bears?
People ask me all the time, do you miss covering college basketball? And my answer consistently is, I don't know. I know that I miss winning. I miss covering winning, right? Because it's just different when you're like, look, 2018 here was a prime example of it. The Bears got on that heater. They went from 3-3 to 12-4 division championship home playoff game at Soldier Field. You remember the electricity that was in the city. You remember the buzz, the excitement. You remember the fun of Club Dub. You remember the excitement of the gadget plays that Matt Nagy was pulling out every 3rd or 4th week. There's an energy that comes with a run like that, where there's a surge there. When you cover programs that are doing that every single year, that energy just builds, right? And it becomes this snowball that goes from this size, into a massive snowball that's hard to slow down. And so that part of things is really, really cool. It was again, it's just what a dream come true for me to be placed at that place during that stage of my career and be able to follow championship level programs who do it on the highest level year in and year out. And to be able to observe that was really, really fun.
Dan, before we finish up today, last question. What's a hijink from North Carolina's championship run in 2009?
Yeah, there were a lot of them for that team. One that I will share with you is the day, if you remember Tyler Hansbrough, and the day that he announced that he was going to come back for his senior season. This was actually in the late spring of 2008 when he was making that hard decision on whether to go to the NBA draft or come back. Wanted to win a national championship, announced that decision on the last day of classes at North Carolina, which is also a day that the parties begin to happen. And so Tyler and a handful of buddies from the team wound up at a giant fraternity party on the campus of North Carolina. This is before the era of smartphones became what it is today. There were camera phones there, but it wasn't smartphone era. And there was a pool set up, a above ground pool set up beneath a balcony at one of the fraternity houses. And these guys were launching themselves off this balcony. Not the smartest move in the world, but it was the last day of classes. Everyone was feeling it on the campus in Chapel Hill. And so sometimes, college indiscretion comes into play, and even the best superstars on championship winning teams decide to do stupid things and jump off balconies into pools below. And that's one example of things that team did. But I'll say this, I think you bring that up because that's part of the title of the book I wrote about that 2009 North Carolina National Championship team. What I always said about that team is they had a tremendous balance of understanding how to take the pursuit of success very, very seriously without taking themselves very seriously. And so there was this blend of drive and just college tomfoolery mixed together that made it a really fun group. And you saw why in moments of extreme pressure, they were able to respond because they weren't uptight, right? They were loose at all times and they were able to handle it. And so that was pretty cool.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Best wishes covering the rest of this weird Bears season. And I'm sure we'll catch up again very soon. Thank you so much.
You got it. We'll see which direction this thing takes.